Sure.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Welcome to Little Lunch number 44. Today's a meeting essentially for us to talk about the future planning for the Arts Front work and for the Little Lunches and how they connect into our plans for a big gathering at the end of the year. But we'll start by just with an acknowledgement of country, and so we're really privileged to be on the beautiful lands of the Cubby Cubby people in the Sunshine Coast region, and would like to pay our respects to their elders past, present and future, and thank them for all the work that they do looking after the place where we live and work. It's a real privilege to be here. There's a little bit of housekeeping that we'll run through. I don't think we need to run through the housekeeping with the group that we've got at the moment, so I think that's okay. And we might jump in. We're going to keep it to 30 minutes and use this time together to look at where we're heading with the Little Lunch work and how that connects into the larger Arts Front program. And we might spend a little bit of time just explaining that and having it on the video, so others who can't make the call today can have a look at it later and maybe comment and feedback through the website. We've been doing the Arts Front project for 4 years now, and it's about a future visioning for the arts and cultural sector that's led by artists, with the idea that we come up with a shared vision for where we want to be in 2030, using rights-based frameworks as a way to kind of connect the various different parts that make up the arts and cultural sector, and to think about the idea of a compact that artists develop together and then sign off as our commitment to each other, a kind of show of connectedness and solidarity that helps us have stronger voice in advocacy and stronger presence in the sector more broadly. We've got in our program, and this has been there for a while, a way to finish off the 4 years of the Arts Front project. And essentially that was, it started with a large gathering, whole of sector gathering in Footscray in Melbourne, 230 people and quite a large online participant group over 3 days, which was an amazing time together, but also a very expensive event. And so we didn't have the capacity to do a face-to-face event again to finish the project. And we were also doing a lot of work with, I guess there was a much bigger focus on climate and the footprint of the arts sector and the investment in time and money and the cost in terms of the environment for getting people together and flying around the place. So over the course of the 4 years, a big theme for Arts Front has been looking at ways that people can work together and connect and do stuff, but without necessarily having to be physically in the same room. So obviously the Little Lunch is an example of that. The idea of a whole of sector festival / conference was in our program earlier for those kind of climate reasons initially. But now with the COVID thing, I suppose that's been amplified. The Arts Front platform itself is being developed parallel to all of that work as a way to support the arts and cultural sector do this sort of work. And it's designed to give us ways for people to run their own actions and connect and, I guess, do things that contribute to that shared vision in practical ways. So there's the early points of that in the website. If you have a bit of a dig around, you'll see the starting point of some actions. The one that Anne's been running, for instance, with people contributing support for the online connectedness of people as an action. That's early stages of that, the sorts of things that are practical things that we can do in our working lives and as artists to meet our kind of shared vision for the future and what the arts and cultural sector could be in 2030. So, Sarah, did you want to add anything there, or we might?
No, I think keep going. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. No, I think keep going and get some of the outline in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of, or get some contribution really, because I think we've got a big voice in this. So.
Well, the idea for November is a whole of sector thing that maybe is a month-long action that sort of starts, runs across the whole month and provides options for people to develop and run their own actions and their own kind of online content. So it could be the sorts of things that we're doing through Little Lunch, could be the kind of things that they did through that artist-led economy symposium last night, or it could take other sorts of forms and shapes. But we're really at the stage now of starting to look for input into what that larger conference could be like, how it could, I guess, give voice to all of the diversity and different types of representation people want to do, and also help us kind of bring that compact together and launch the platform, so that essentially then we've got like a bit of a plan in place for what we do together over the next 10 years. So we started this work a little bit last week on the Friday session, and we're going to ask Melissa if she could just bring us up to date in a very kind of dot point way, the main things that came out of last Friday's conversations, just so we've got that in our minds. Thanks, Melissa.
Oh, no worries. And absolutely thank you for the last 44 days that we've had together. It's been amazing. So as someone sitting in the far regions, but I didn't get full notes because I figured Anne had. So I was gathering, people loved the chance to speak. So having a voice, extended conversations. There was a sense that some needed longer time and more in depth and possibly more focus. The opportunity to meet the network and meet people that you wouldn't normally. A lot of people love that. National is great. The surprises in the program. It works actually a bit like a marketplace, which was something we hadn't really factored. Decision makers, so funding bodies being there. A moment of visibility and time capturing the sector. The other notes I took. I've been listening to all the sessions again, and I'm hearing access, human rights, voice, and storytelling. They would be the key common themes. And then the last thing that was discussed in depth was the format of performances and how to do that, whether that would be a festival or not. So that took up a lot of the main conversation. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks. And so there's a few other things underway. We'd hoped Leah might have been able to join us, but she's, it's the last of the teaching weeks this week, so she's tied up, unfortunately, so she'll contribute later. But there's work with the Horizon Festival to do some online stuff that's focused around technology and the environment. So that's kind of some stuff that will happen prior to November 2030, but could be the start of a larger conversation. In the same way that work that took place last night, the artist-led economy symposium could, for instance, pick up an extension of that work that might look at some of the global connections there, and we could do that through the work in November. We'll be obviously doing the launch and development of the compact and the platform itself. But other than that, it's pretty much an open framework for people to, I suppose we're at a stage now of developing an EOI process for people to start to talk about the kinds of things they'd like to do in that time, in that frame. Some of our other partners in the US who work in the rural advocacy area have got a strong interest in partnering with us on some of these things, so we'll bring them into this conversation. Kathy Hunt from the WOW Festival is also kind of working with us to bring some of the WOW voices into these processes, and so all within this human rights framework, which is good. But it's interesting, like we're still obviously very early stages at learning how to do this kind of online stuff well, and things that work and things that don't. So we can still continue to use the little lunches as an experimental space for that, and kind of learn from other actions and other things that people do. I was going to maybe ask if Elliot wanted to throw in his thoughts about where we're up to at the moment and how the 2030 thing is shaping up from his point of view.
Firstly, I think I'll just make a couple of comments on Little Lunch Online, and then maybe how that kind of ties into the wider idea of the November event. So in particular, I think it's been really great to see the sector, the kind of sector interest in Little Lunch Online. It started as an idea, very much off the cuff, I suppose. Norm and Sarah sent me a text message and said, "What do you think about the idea of doing a daily half an hour on Zoom?" And I went,
"Did you know?"
I don't know. Yeah, I was like, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. So from something that started as a very simple and quite spur of the moment idea, it's been quite empowering to see it get shape and form that's been directed by the sector and not by the Arts Front team. Certainly, we think there have been some very important and significant conversations come up through these channels. And I particularly think it is the fact that it is a fairly informal space that helps make a lot of that conversation possible and grounded, I guess. It's not a highly kind of overproduced event, so it gives people the confidence and competence to feel like they can jump in and say what they want to say without having to hold back too much. And I think seeing different parties get involved and pick up the role of hosting events, kind of identifying topics to talk about and bringing in other voices has been fundamental to the success of the model. It's not to say that I think the model is perfect and there isn't room for some adaptation and change, but I think it's gone, as an experimental space, I think it's worked quite well in terms of really helping people understand that this isn't about Artsfront highly curating and programming a space, but rather about creating a platform and opportunity for the sector to make those decisions and inform that. In lots of ways, it's kind of become a bit of a precursor to the November online event. Again, another interesting moment when Norm and Sarah sent me a text and said, hey, you know how we were talking about doing a real life event, a physical event in November? What if we just did it all online for a whole month? So in some ways, this has kind of been good because it's given us an opportunity to demonstrate that that is actually very possible and very feasible. And increasingly, the sector is becoming more aware of the potential of these kinds of platforms as a way of doing this kind of work that has less of an impact environmentally, but also which can provide access in ways that physical travel just can't. You know, there's always going to be people who are left out of a process when you have to meet in a physical place. So I think in lots of ways, it's not to say that COVID-19 has been a good thing, but in some ways it's been serendipitous for this kind of work, because I think in lots of ways it's really helped people get their head around the kind of Artsfront project and what it does in a way that was more difficult for them to understand outside of the kind of COVID-19 context. So I think what that means is that the sector will be in a much better place to work together towards the idea of co-creating a program for that November series of events that genuinely reflects what the sector is interested in, the conversations they want to be having, and hopefully will engage a whole number of people in that process. Is there anything else you wanted me to talk about, Noel?
No, that's good. Thanks, Elliot. I mean,
No.
I think that's a good, it's a great opportunity, I think, for us to get around the room and get everyone else's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Malika, we were just, just sharing a bit of stuff about like where we think we might be able to take this work in terms of like a larger online gathering that we're planning for November, and thinking about some of the steps between that and how we can kind of, I guess it's a bit of an open question for us as to whether or not to try and keep the Little Lunch series running through, or whether we can kind of have different ways of approaching that kind of work together over the time. There's some other events that Artsfront's involved in different ways that it's, again, can feed into it. Like the work that happened last night was an example of something that's kind of it's really getting great. It got a lot of buy-in from the sector. It's like, I think there were like 350 people registered and created profiles on the Artsfront system to be a part of that that symposium last night. So that was incredible.
That was an example of becoming longer and more focused and being particular. So whether you look at that, do we do little lunches every day? Do we do more focused? But in terms of leading up to that November, what do you think, Malika?
Look, I think that it's been an extremely useful professional development experience to be able to access little snippets of things. This is what I've suggested to some of my staff: is treat it like, make the time, treat it like you're going to a conference. Treat it like you're actually going to an event, and go and find some and start, because we're in the disability and mental health space primarily, is find those ones that match that for you, and go and just sit there and watch them. Don't get distracted, because it's easy to we've got different distractions working at home, and we might be tired with our work, but very to go and do the washing. So you've got all these other distractions, but use it like a conference program. Go and find these things and get that content. Then go and look up those artists. It's been excellent. Sorry to the interpreter, I'm very fast. It's been excellent for finding content that's specifically around an issue. And that's what the little bios are about. And being able to then target certain staff and say, this is good for you to go and watch that. And then I want you to tell me about that artist because it connects to their work. It's one of those things, once you start it, the idea that it might be gone is a bit break heart. Yeah. And I would hate for it to disappear. And so believe the sector has should be investing in something like this continuing. If not daily, then definitely a weekly something that brings people together in a very non-confrontational way, being able to ask questions without having to get the chat and the questions. It's the viability of it, of course, is the question, but it's been an important part of this COVID experience.
That's interesting. I think when you're talking, it's interesting. I keep thinking of that old-fashioned old stuff of the hypertext where you kind of find your own pathway. So if you get to that point where you've got enough content with enough diversity that you can actually find that pathway and cobble together the journey there.
Yeah, I think that's really useful, Malika. And it feels like there's some really great ways we could, certainly I can imagine some fantastic content that, featured so strongly in the November program. And then to think about if there are stepping stones for getting there that could, build on the networking that's been happening through the access sector. And
It feels like something that in the future has a membership or this is a professional development opportunity, very much so for me and for the people who I talk to about it. So it's something that you can see that's an investment at organisation level, at individual level. It comes in all forms.
Anne, did you want to reflect on any of the stuff from your point of view?
Thanks, Norm. I'm agreeing with Elliot largely. I mean, I do think it's been a fantastic opportunity for people to explore different ways of being engaged and getting into conversation. My interest is now sort of going to the end and working backwards, like really looking at what can we expect to achieve in November, and that we do have to be much more curated about that than we've been about this process that's built up to it. So if we get a strong sense about how we can what we can achieve over the month of November, then I think we can work backwards. So, I mean, one of the things that's come out strongly to me over this time is how important busting or breaking into the dominant culture is, building a dominant culture of inclusion and respect and those sorts of things, and how different groups of people have found a voice and a place. And so I think that's right. We need to build on that. So November needs to reflect both the overall thing we're trying to achieve, as well as all of the individual groups of people and their voice. And so we need to make sure that voice doesn't get lost as we build into a bigger picture. So it's not very formed in my mind, but it's, and maybe some of the things I'm saying are really old, but I mean, clearly we have to build a vision that enables people that reflects who all of the people are, who not only who have participated, but, like that we model what we have been talking about in the last nearly 50 days. So somehow it would be helpful for me if we could get a really good picture about what we think might happen in November, how we would do that, because then we can use whatever we do in the run-up as a kind of rehearsal, really. Let people find themselves and their voice, different people who haven't spoken yet. You know, we might need to do some stuff with young people, and we might need to re-engage with the First Nations NIACA topic, and you know, we need to build those topics back in and let people explore their views. And then we need to build performances around all of that.
That's interesting in how we do that and have that conversation. And then it's interesting, is that something we write up and then send around and then have a conversation with everyone? Or
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I don't think we're experienced enough at working in this way to actually build it together from scratch. I mean, well, in a way, we have been building it from scratch. People have been putting in, you know, sharing their views and telling us what they think. I do think we need to try and write something up.
Manna, have you...
and every time I sit down to do it, I can't do it.
And Manna, it's so lovely to be able to see you as well as see your amazing work. So Manna's been working with us as one of the captioning team and has been like an ear and an eye on a lot of this work. So I was just wanting to get her thoughts.
I think the online has been great, and the fact that in November everything will be online is really great because it's so accessible to everyone. And just what Elliot was saying before, like getting to meet, I can't remember if it was Elliot, but just being able to meet all the artists sort of across Australia. Like you said, it's environmentally friendly as well. But I'd be really interested, I feel like when I have been watching these little lunches, I haven't seen a lot of, I guess, younger artists get involved as much. And it would be nice to see them sort of get involved because they're going to be the next generation of artists. And if there's a way to, I guess, get this platform across to them, I think some of them probably don't know that this exists, or if there's a way to get that out to them, I think that would be really fantastic, like just to get them into the conversation as well. So yeah, but no, it's been fantastic.
I think that's interesting. I think that's a good reflection. Nicole, what were you saying in some of the, or are you there?
Oh, it was something that I was just responding to, I don't know who was speaking at the time. I think she's offline now. But it was really about the fact that she said to her staff that she treated it like a small conference. So that meant that people had,
Malika, yeah.
Yeah, that they had access to people who normally wouldn't have, see those people or come in touch with them, and then they research them later. And there we're creating new relationships and new possibilities and new opportunities for the artists that are involved. It's looking at to capitalise on that, I suppose, because we're also considering how artists are not having very many opportunities, or during this period of time, how do we engage them? Like we saw that beautiful woman who did that dance down her back pathway, and there was no music and she was just in her element, and it was so engaged, and that would spark somebody's interest to then go research her and then possibly engage her for work further along. So for me, coming as a practitioner, I'm looking at those opportunities as an arts practitioner for other artists, certainly. Don't know how to capitalise on that, but I think you're doing a great job as it is doing that. So whether it's, these small snippets then become something much bigger.
Thanks,
we're
Nicole.
thinking about.
Glazer, did you want to just let people know about the work that you guys have been doing through Diversity Arts Australia and the future visioning stuff in particular, but anything else that you wanted to share would be great.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. With Stories from the Future is a project that's supported by Arts Front as well as a whole lot of partners across the country and Australia, Council for the Arts. And we've been running workshops that invite First Nations and culturally diverse artists and arts workers to imagine a more equitable future and create a timeline towards 2050 of actions that would lead to, a more equitable landscape for the arts. So a lot of the conversations that I've been hearing through the Little Lunch online, through the lunches so far, some of the topics have also come up during the workshops. So it's great to hear it's been a kind of like a widespread kind of arts impact. And we're also hosting online Brisbane workshops. I think we're just figuring out a date in late July or August at the moment with BMAC. So stay tuned for that, and I'll share the link in the chat as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for your support, both during the lunches and also the social media support to help promote the lunches. It's been really important. And we're also, I guess, talking with Lena and the team there about co-hosting and designing some lunches together there too. Hey, Melissa, can you just let everyone know about the regionally focused stuff that you're thinking about and how that might connect with that work in November?
Yeah, same thing. The recent experiences, and I suppose the arts-based conferences really are glaring because we know how little our bucket is, and when you go to these very big national conferences or state ones, it does jar, you know, when you think of the resources spent on them, and then you're struggling and you're sitting in a room with others struggling. So we at Arts Nexus have been thinking about, and through Arts Front and the partnership, we've been just drip feeding and trying to find ways to connect, realise that regional voice can't just, as in other groups, can't just come into a forum and bang, you've got your voice and your key points. So having ongoing dialogue and pulling in all of the disparate groups and even within ourselves to agree on what we wanted to take to some of these conferences. So that started, Norm, in the lead up to Melbourne. You joined us online. I've got a photo to prove it. And we had an initial discussion. So I was mandated with different opinions to take to that Arts Front conference. So I didn't just go in my own self. So I really want to, I'm hearing the different key segments. So trying to get people to talk. So young people, it's not just for young people to talk, it's for people that partner with young people. It's, you know, those that have something to give to that sector as well. So having that symposium type arrangement. And so I've started by doing a bit of call out for people to do a Zoom meet now. I'd like to build that up and then feed that in through to November. But I have to say, the other thing I feel about Little Lunch Online is that because you've got hosts and they're focused on the content, the fact that you've got this back end spine, I suppose, and having Anne, having you watching over and knowing that you would be keep picking up those threads, as hard as it is, but that feels watched over to me. And when I go to these conferences, I often feel like the conversations just fly away. They happen in the room and then they get filtered, and then you see, but these are the recommendations going forward. And so often, if you've got a smaller voice, you walk away feeling so despondent and jaded by that process, that even a smallest little gem of an idea can float away. So I feel documenting these conversations has to be built in a really strategic key way that doesn't filter in the way that we've always done in the past, where you distill and try and get the key one point because you're talking to a politician. I think we should be talking the other way, to the sector and empowering them, and the politicians should just be one of them. The fact they don't hang out on these sessions, even in disguise, I think is crazy. I'd be there with my notebook for sure.
Well, that's the streaming side of it, hey, so they can watch it later.
Maybe
Hey,
that's
thank you, Melissa. And Manna, thank you for swapping over with Emily, because we just had to make that switch so Emily had a chance to join in before we finish up. So thanks again, Emily, as you're doing the amazing captioning work that you've been doing. And so just keen to get your observations on how things are going and what we could do in November.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you for having me. I think this has been such an incredible group and really supportive. I'm not sure if I speak to the young people, but I'm 23. And I think just telling a lot of my friends, I work in the film industry, and just telling a lot of my friends about Artsfront and the type of conversations that I've had access to has been incredible, because I feel like even going through film school or like writing rooms that I spend time in, a lot of the time, I mean, a lot of the topics that have come up, I just have been totally unaware of. So it's been really eye-opening for me. And even if I wasn't captioning, I'd be joining in each day from here on in. So it's been really empowering for me to have more perspective. So yeah, I think I wish, I think someone said it before, but I wish I could tell more younger people in the industry. I think I'm just speaking from the film industry at the moment, but it's being aware of these stories and voices and perspectives all across Australia and regional communities is really empowering for storytelling and thinking what type of stories we tell on screen at the moment. So yeah.
I suppose that's been interesting, talking about the film industry and getting your
colleagues to participate, and how we create room. And I think it's like you were saying, Malika, that it's having that specific conversations that are threads. So that would work. So do we escalate to be inclusive of the film industry, and looking in this conversations about what we haven't captured so far, and yeah,
it'd be great to tease that out a bit, Emily, and just see what ways I think, both with the sort of film sector, but also I think the point you're making about more broad connections with the art colleges and different university courses makes a lot of sense, because it's a great way to connect with young artists and to that thinking.
Definitely.
Hey, listen, we're pretty much on time, so we're probably going to finish up now. Can I just see if there's anyone else who wants to say anything before we tie it up?
Who's Karen?
I'm not sure. We sent Karen a message, but we haven't had a response.
She's happy to listen.
Yeah. Hi, Karen.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone. And next week, we'll keep this Friday spot for this kind of conversation about thinking about how the little lunches are shaping up, some bit of a forum for that, but we'll really start to hone in. I think Anne's suggestion about putting some shape around November and working backwards makes sense. So we'll start to try to do that, have that as a process that everyone can contribute through Google Docs or something similar, and then maybe start to think about an EOI call out that could start to connect with people who want to put their hand up to do some stuff.
Yep.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
are we still recording?